When my wife died, my son said, "You can't bring mom back, and my wife's birthday is only once a year." Those words hit me harder than the cancer that took Margaret from me. He stood there in my kitchen holding a protein smoothie in one hand and flipping through his phone with the other, as if we were just talking about groceries. Not the funeral we were planning for the woman who raised him. The woman who never missed a single one of his birthdays, even when she was too weak to get out of bed. I didn't speak for a long time after he said that. I just stood there next to the open dishwasher, staring at Margaret's coffee cup. Her lipstick still faintly marked the rim. She never wore much makeup, but she liked that rose color. Said it made her feel alive, even during chemo. Kyle didn't seem to notice the silence. He went on rambling about the party plans for Megan's birthday, how the caterers needed the final head count, how the band was driving in from Des Moines. "You understand, right?" he asked. "It's not personal." I nodded slowly, because what else was I going to do? Scream at my son the day before burying my wife? I watched him leave like he had somewhere better to be. And I suppose to him he did. That night I sat alone in the living room and reread the funeral program for the fifth time. Kyle's name was printed right there in bold font, pallbearer. I scratched it out with Margaret's favorite pen, the one with sunflowers on the barrel. Then I crossed out his name again for good measure. The funeral came and went. He never showed. Not even a text. People asked, of course. "Where's Kyle? Did he miss his flight? Is he okay?" I kept my answers vague. Something came up. "He sends his love." It was easier than saying the truth aloud, that he chose balloons and party streamers over his mother's casket. At the cemetery, I stood beside her grave in a cold Iowa wind, listening to the pastor speak about devotion and family. The words felt brittle in my ears. My hands were clenched in my coat pockets, not from the cold, but to keep from shaking. Mrs. Henderson leaned in close and whispered, "She was so proud of him, you know. Always talking about Kyle's job, his success. That boy meant the world to her." I nodded, but I didn't speak. Because the truth is, Margaret did defend him right up until the very end, even when he missed 3 chemo appointments in a row. Even when he didn't call for 6 weeks during her final summer. "He's busy," she'd said, folding his old baby clothes into boxes for the attic. "Young couples need their space." I never corrected her. It felt cruel to take that away, even if it wasn't true. After everyone left, I stayed. Watched them lower her into the ground. Watched the wind flatten the flowers on her casket. Watched the gravediggers look at their watches like they had other appointments. And when the dirt started hitting the lid, I didn't cry. Not until I got home. Not until I saw her glasses still resting on the nightstand. Her bookmark waiting in a half-read novel. The next morning at 8:30 sharp, Kyle called. His voice was chipper. "Hey, Dad. Hope you're doing okay after everything." Everything. That's what he called it. Then he asked for money. Said the party went a little overboard. Something about a diamond bracelet for Megan. A steakhouse. The band cost more than expected. $15,000 on the credit card, and he needed a little help. That was the moment I realized something Margaret must have known for years but never said out loud. Our son loved our money more than he loved us. I told him no. It was the first time I'd ever said that to Kyle in his entire adult life, and the silence that followed felt like the most honest conversation we'd ever had. He hung up. No apology. No second try. I opened my laptop and started going through our financial records. Tuition, car payments, the down payment on his house, his wedding, that trip to Europe to find himself. Nearly $1 million in total. Margaret had recorded every one of those sacrifices in a little notebook I found in her closet. She'd even tallied the amounts next to each date. Next to one, she wrote, "Postponed my mammogram. Kyle needed new tires." That was when the cold inside me hardened into something stronger than grief. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. But I wanted the truth to matter. Before we continue, I make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The morning after that phone call, I sat at my desk in the study. Margaret and I had converted from Kyle's childhood bedroom. The walls still had faint outlines where glow-in-the-dark stars used to be. I'd peeled them down one by one after he moved out, each little star leaving behind a spotless rectangle in the paint, like his absence had scrubbed the place clean. I opened a fresh yellow legal pad and wrote 2 words at the top. Financial reckoning. It felt dramatic but fitting. I started with tuition. 4 years at Iowa State, $52,000 per year. That much I remembered clearly because I'd skipped our 30th anniversary trip to Scotland so he could avoid student loans. Margaret never said a word. She just canceled the reservations and made meatloaf that night. Then came the MBA program he needed to get ahead, the one he dropped out of halfway through semester 2. $48,000 for a degree he never earned. His first car, $35,000. Reliable and safe, he'd said. It was a Lexus, then Europe. It's just a short trip to recharge before real life starts. $35,000. The wedding, $75,000. Margaret cried when he said they were hiring a planner. We didn't even have a caterer, she said. Your father's cousins brought covered dishes. And then the house. Oh, the house. The perfect white colonial in Westbrook Pines. 5 bedrooms, wraparound porch, Megan's Pinterest dream. The down payment, $350,000. They didn't have a dime saved, not even for closing costs. I co-signed the mortgage, liquidated a portion of my retirement, and wired the funds the same day. Kyle hugged me and said, "You're saving our future, Dad." He never said thank you. In total, it came to $847,000. That's not counting the emergency loans, the shopping addiction Megan called retail therapy, or the failed candle business that burned through $12,000 in 6 months. I added it all up again, slower this time. The number didn't change. $847,000. Not a loan, not an investment. Just one long bleeding vein from Margaret and me to Kyle and Megan, all in the name of love and family. I pulled open Margaret's Bible. She always kept it on her nightstand, bookmarked to Psalms. Inside I found the note I'd read before, but now it meant something different. My dearest Alan, please don't let Kyle forget us. We gave him everything we had. I hope that was enough. All my love, M. I touched her handwriting like it could bring her back. Then I looked at the wall clock. 10:03 a.m., time to go to work. That afternoon I met with my attorney, Robert Chen. A good man. Quiet, thorough, loyal. The kind of lawyer who doesn't advertise on billboards but gets results when it counts. I handed him the file folder I'd prepared. I want to change my estate plan, I said. Margaret and I had it set up so Kyle would inherit everything. That's over. He flipped through the pages slowly. Tuition receipts, wire transfers, a photo of Kyle and Megan on a yacht in the Bahamas. A trip they took while Margaret was undergoing her 2nd round of chemo. Robert looked up. This is going to be complicated, Alan. No, I said, steady. It's going to be fair. I outlined the plan. A foundation in Margaret's name. Scholarships. Cancer research grants. Small business support for women over 50. The kinds of causes Margaret used to support with handwritten checks and tithes. And Kyle? Robert asked. Nothing, I said. Not a dime, not even a copy of the will. Robert leaned back, his brow furrowing. He'll contest this. Let him try. That night I went home and opened a dusty old folder labeled Foster Construction, Staff Records. Inside was Kyle's employee file. I had hired him 8 years ago as a junior manager. He was supposed to learn the ropes, earn his way into the business. Instead, he'd floated through the office like royalty, missed deadlines, abused the company card. Clients tolerated him because they liked me. I highlighted every infraction, every warning HR had issued, every performance review where I'd looked the other way. The next morning, I called Sarah Mitchell into my office. She ran HR and had been with the company 20 years. Sarah, I said, I need you to prepare termination documents for Kyle. Today. She didn't blink. Full protocol? Full protocol, security escort, email access revoked, door badge disabled. She nodded. I've had the paperwork ready for 6 months. I just didn't think you'd ever ask. At 9:17 a.m., Kyle walked in, 15 minutes late, whistling and sipping an iced latte. Megan's voice was in his ear on speakerphone, babbling about dinner plans. Dad, he said, smiling, need something? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Sit down, Kyle. We're going to have a professional conversation. He laughed, confused. Is this a joke? I pushed the termination packet across the desk. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. His smile collapsed. You're firing me? You're actually firing your own son? I folded my hands. This is a business decision, based on performance, not blood. Security escorted him out 6 minutes later. He didn't take his family photo from his desk, didn't even finish his latte. And as the office door closed behind him, I felt the first quiet stirrings of something I hadn't felt in months. Not grief, not rage, clarity. The war for my dignity had begun, and I was finally fighting back. It was astonishing, really. How quiet the building felt once Kyle was gone. His absence left a strange peace behind. No careless laughter in the hallways, no sudden rescheduling of meetings he'd forgotten to prepare for. No more half-hearted excuses for why client calls had gone unanswered. My employees, some of whom had been with me since the drywall and dust days of Foster construction, seemed to walk taller that afternoon. I caught glances between them. Not pity, not gossip, respect. I sat alone in my office for a long time after Sarah filed the termination papers. The window behind my desk faced West 8th Street, where the first strip mall I ever built still stood, now home to a vape shop and a 24-hour gym. I remembered laying the foundation myself, back when I couldn't afford to hire labor. The concrete had set in the wrong weather and cracked on day 2. I fixed it alone under floodlights, with Margaret bringing me sandwiches at midnight. She'd sat on a folding chair by the truck, reading aloud from the local paper to keep me company. Every partnership starts in the trenches, she used to say. We built this business by hand, sweat, and faith. Kyle had never been in a trench a day in his life, and yet for years I'd let him walk through this company like a prince in waiting. Protected, coddled, funded. Even Margaret, in her quiet wisdom, had started to see it. Maybe we're not doing him any favors, she whispered once while reviewing the monthly ledgers. I didn't want to believe it then. I do now. I reached for the intercom. Sarah, could you come back in? She appeared 2 minutes later, notebook in hand. I'd like to make a formal announcement to the staff, I said. No details, just that Kyle's left the company and we're moving forward. Smooth, professional. She nodded. I'll draft something. As she stood to leave, I added, and Sarah, thank you for waiting, for keeping this place together when I wasn't ready to face the truth. She looked at me for a long beat, then said, we all loved Margaret, and we all saw what you didn't. Until now. That afternoon, I walked the job site of the Maplewood project, a 30-unit townhome build we'd started in spring. I met with foremen, asked questions I'd delegated for too long, shook hands with the laborers. Men and women whose names Kyle had never bothered to learn. The site manager, Joe Ramos, showed me a cracked support beam Kyle had signed off on last month. We replaced it on our own dime, Joe said. Didn't trust his judgment. I nodded. You did the right thing. He studied me for a moment. You doing okay, sir? I didn't lie. I will be. That evening, I went home, made myself dinner, a real one, and sat down at the dining table I used to share with Margaret. I lit a candle. Just one. Her old habit. Makes the food taste more important, she'd say. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was restorative. Until the knock on the door. Sharp, rhythmic, impatient. I opened it to find Megan standing there. Perfect hair, too much perfume, fury painted across her face like war paint. "You fired my husband," she hissed. "No, hello." "Yes," I said. "You humiliated him. In front of everyone. He's devastated." I leaned against the doorframe. Not as devastated as Margaret was when he missed her last birthday. That hit her. For a second, her eyes darted away. "This is vindictive," she snapped. "You're grieving and unstable. This isn't how family behaves." "Neither is skipping your mother-in-law's funeral for a steakhouse birthday party." She stepped closer. "You're destroying your legacy. This company was meant for Kyle. He's your only son." "Legacy is earned," I said, "not handed out like a party favor." Megan's voice dropped to a threat. "You'll regret this. We'll sue for wrongful termination. We'll contest the will. Kyle is entitled to half of everything you own." That was when I realized something chilling. Not a hint of sadness in her face. Not one word about Margaret. Just money. Control. I looked her square in the eyes. "Margaret left everything to me. Kyle gets nothing. And if you come to my house again uninvited, I'll call the police." She flinched. "You wouldn't dare." "I just did." I closed the door slowly, listening to her heels click back down the walkway. The next morning, I met Robert Chen again. We updated the will, filed the documents to make the Margaret Foster Memorial Foundation official, structured the estate into an irrevocable trust. I added a clause. Kyle Foster and all current or future descendants are to be explicitly excluded as beneficiaries under any circumstance. Robert reviewed it twice. "This is airtight," he said. "You're sure?" "More sure than I've ever been." We sent the formal notice to Kyle by certified mail. That same week, I contacted the board of the Davenport Country Club and resigned my family membership. Quietly, with dignity. I didn't want whispers or speculation, but I made one last call to William Hayes, board president and Margaret's old bridge partner. I told him everything, and by Sunday morning, Megan's invitation to the ladies' wine mixer was rescinded. That was only the beginning. Because when you spend decades building a name in a town like Davenport, people listen. People care. And when you quietly cut the golden child off, financially and socially, the vacuum he leaves behind tells a louder story than any lawsuit ever could. Justice wasn't loud. It was methodical, and it was just getting started. The first signs came quietly, like the early cracks in a frozen lake. A missed brunch invitation here, a canceled golf game there. Nothing dramatic at first, just the subtle unspooling of social ties Kyle and Megan had assumed were permanent. People stopped replying to their texts. Conversations ended faster. Dinners were postponed indefinitely. Megan's curated online world, once flooded with likes and comments, started to go strangely quiet. At first, Kyle didn't notice, or maybe he refused to, but the shift became undeniable the morning he showed up at the Davenport Country Club and found his membership card flagged. "Sir," the manager said, his voice stiff, "there's been a change in your membership status." Kyle blinked. "What kind of change?" "Board voted last night. Your privileges are suspended pending further review." "Review of what?" The manager hesitated, then said, "Conduct unbecoming of club values." Kyle stood there in pressed slacks and a Ralph Lauren polo, gripping his monogrammed golf bag like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "What values?" he demanded. The manager didn't answer. Later that day, Megan's yoga studio sent her a gentle email, informing her that her standing reservation had been reassigned. Due to high demand, we're rotating class access among members. A lie, but a socially acceptable one. Megan replied with 3 paragraphs about her loyalty, her Instagram reach, her influence. No one responded. The bridge club Margaret had once helped build removed Megan from the guest list of the annual tea. At Burdorf's boutique, the clerk who'd once fawned over her wardrobe gave a polite smile and offered a generic coupon instead of the usual VIP treatment. One by one, the pillars of their lifestyle began to erode, not with scandal, but with silence. And I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. Davenport did the work for me. In a town like ours, people paid attention to what you showed up for. What you didn't show up for. A man who skipped his mother's funeral didn't deserve to host charity dinners. A couple who humiliated their benefactor in public didn't get to keep the privileges earned by someone else's sacrifice. Kyle called me after the 3rd week of this slow-motion collapse. "Tad," he said, his voice tight, "are you telling people not to talk to us?" "No." "Then what the hell is going on?" I didn't say a word. He filled the silence like he always did. "Megan's crying every day. People are treating us like we're lepers, like we've done something unforgivable." I could almost hear Margaret whispering, "Actions have consequences." Kyle lowered his voice. "We can't live like this. Megan's threatening to leave. I need help, Dad. A clean slate. A loan to get us through." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned toward Margaret's photo on the mantel. Her face as it looked at 23, smiling in the wedding dress her grandmother had hand-stitched. The same face that had aged beside me through 4 decades of sacrifice, sorrow, joy, and worry. The same face that once lit up when Kyle said mama for the first time. And the same face that stared blankly out a hospital window when he missed her final Christmas. "No," I said. His voice cracked. "You're punishing me." "I'm correcting a mistake," I said. "One I let go on too long." "You're being cruel." "No," I repeated. "Cruel was asking for money the morning after we buried your mother." He hung up without another word. The next morning, I made an appointment with David Harrison, the manager at First National Bank. I'd co-signed Kyle and Megan's mortgage 8 years ago, guaranteeing their loan after the bank hesitated. My signature had opened every financial door in their world. It was time to close them. David's office was crisp, sterile. Glass walls, brushed steel. The kind of space designed to impress people like Cody Jenkins. David greeted me like an old friend. "Mr. Foster, what can I do for you today?" "I'm here to remove my name from Kyle Foster's mortgage guarantee." His pen stopped midair. "Sir, you do realize what that means?" "I do." He cleared his throat. "There's an outstanding balance. If they can't make payments on their own, I'm aware. Foreclosure proceedings could begin. That's the bank's business, not mine." I placed a legal envelope on his desk. Documents Robert Chen had prepared. Withdrawal of guarantee, 30-day notice. David looked up. "You're certain?" "More than certain." He tapped the papers gently. "This will hit their credit hard." I leaned in. "David, I've spent the last 15 years protecting someone who didn't care if I ate dinner alone. I'm done paying for other people's comfort while I grieve alone in a house full of memories." David studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "We'll proceed." That evening, I drove past a 1247 Maple Avenue, the dream house I'd bought for Kyle and Megan's future. String lights still hung from the gutters, a wreath on the door, artificial and perfect. But inside, things were unraveling. I could feel it in my bones. The foreclosure process had started, and unlike before, I wasn't going to shield them from the storm. I was going to let the rain come through every leak they'd ignored. The first mortgage notice came quietly, on just a white envelope on their doorstep, lost among catalogs and credit card offers. Kyle probably ignored it. The second arrived 2 weeks later. Bold red print warning delinquent. Immediate attention required. I imagine that one caught Megan's eye. She always noticed anything printed in red. By then, I'd already withdrawn my name from the credit card guarantees, too. The Nordstrom account. The Platinum Amex. Even the Home Design Rewards Visa Megan used to buy silk curtains and call it investment decor. Robert Chen handled the paperwork precisely. No loopholes, no explanations owed. 3 days later, Megan's card was declined at Bergdorf's. I heard about it from Mrs. Paise Latham, a church friend of Margaret's who worked part-time behind the jewelry counter. She stormed out of there like the Queen of Sheba, she told me on the phone, laughing. Said something about a computer error and promised she'd have it fixed by morning. She didn't. That same week, the utilities at 1247 Maple were shut off for non-payment. Megan posted a cryptic Instagram story that night. Candles flickering in every room captioned romantic vibes. But Kyle's face in the background told the truth. Jaw tight, eyes flat. It wasn't ambiance, it was reality. I didn't smile. Not exactly. But I felt a quiet sense of balance returning to a world that had been off-kilter for too long. At Foster Construction, business boomed. With Kyle gone, timelines tightened. Clients praised the professionalism. One longtime partner even called to say, I almost forgot what it felt like to get answers that didn't sound like excuses. Sarah Mitchell, now managing operations, took over Kyle's projects seamlessly. I gave her a raise without waiting for the end-of-year review. She'd earned it in patience alone. Meanwhile, Kyle's job hunt stalled. Everywhere he interviewed, he ran into a wall of silence. Former clients wouldn't recommend him. His references had holes, and word gets around in a town like ours. Not always from my mouth, but from people who watched the funeral come and go without him. Megan's desperation turned sharper. She called once from a blocked number. I let it ring. The voicemail came 2 minutes later, brittle and breathless. You've made your point. You've humiliated us. Are you proud of yourself? Margaret would be ashamed. You're acting like a bitter old man with nothing left to lose. Then her voice dropped. If we go down, just know. We won't go quietly. She hung up. I replayed the message once, then deleted it. And that night, I opened a new folder on my desk. Mitchell Holdings, LLC. A clean paper trail. A name that meant nothing to Kyle or Megan. Yet. Inside, I placed a plan. 1 property, 1 foreclosure sale, and 1 bidder. Because consequences like winter were coming. The foreclosure auction was held on a chilly Tuesday morning in early March. Not dramatic, mighty just procedural. Courthouse steps, a folding table, 2 clerks in heavy coats holding clipboards. Kyle and Megan stood stiffly near the edge of the small crowd, as if pretending they didn't belong to the home about to be sold. Kyle wore a blazer that no longer fit. Megan had her arms crossed tight against her chest, face pale under too much makeup. I watched from across the street, seated in my car, heater running, hands steady on the wheel. The auctioneer read the legal description in a monotone. Parcel 121B, commonly known as 1247 Maple Avenue. Bidders stirred. 1 flipper, a couple of real estate reps. A woman in a navy coat raised her hand. That was Sarah Mitchell, acting as managing partner of Mitchell Holdings, LLC. She opened the bid at $280,000, calculated precisely to match the remaining balance on the mortgage. Kyle's head jerked toward her. He turned to Megan, whispering urgently. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The flipper raised the next bid. Sarah countered, calm, confident. By $317,000, the flipper hesitated. Sarah stayed silent. The gavel hit the wood with a final crack. Sold to Mitchell Holdings, LLC. Kyle's knees buckled. I stepped out of my car, coat buttoned, gloves on. When he saw me, realization washed over his face like rain over ash. That's your company, he said hoarsely. You bought our house. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I bought a house. I said. You lost it. You planned this. Megan's voice was shrill. You're deranged. You plotted to ruin us. I looked past her. You ruined yourselves. Security kept them from approaching Sarah. Kyle stood there shaking, lips parted, searching for a way to fix it with words. Megan looked ready to lunge. Instead, I handed Sarah a quiet nod. She walked past them, papers in hand, and just like that, the house on Maple was no longer theirs. It wasn't revenge. Not really, it was math. They'd taken more than money. They'd taken dignity, peace, time. Margaret's last years. This was simply the ledger balancing itself. Later that night, I received a voicemail. Kyle's voice, low and broken. I don't know where we're supposed to go. Pause. I don't know who I am without that house. Another pause. You win, Dad. You win. I listened to the message once, then deleted it without saving. Victory wasn't sweet, but it was quiet. And it was mine. 2 weeks later, a moving truck pulled into 1247 Maple. It looked too small. Sad, even. Like it had been rented in haste, without measuring or planning. The kind of truck you reserve when you've run out of options and time. I parked 2 blocks down and walked the neighborhood slowly, hands in my coat pockets, taking in the early signs of spring. Lawns softening, buds on branches. The kind of quiet weather Margaret used to call forgiving. Kyle stood in the driveway, trying to tape shut a broken cardboard box. Megan wasn't helping. She paced in heels, phone to her ear, barking at someone about deposit refunds. A neighbor paused on the sidewalk, watching, then kept walking. No one stopped to help. No casseroles, no farewell hugs, no curious small talk about what's next. Just the sterile chill of social exile. I leaned against a tree, out of view, and watched Kyle wrap Margaret's old vase in one of Megan's scarves, the last item in the house that had come from our side of the family. He placed it in a box marked fragile. Then he stood there, just looking around. He didn't cry. Not like Megan, who threw a suitcase into the truck with theatrical rage 10 minutes later, yelling about her ex-boyfriend in Seattle who actually owned his business. Kyle just moved slower, like each object he touched told a story he didn't want to hear. Later that night, I drove by again. The porch light was off, curtains down, driveway empty. Only the faint square of cleaner paint on the siding showed where their custom Foster sign used to hang. I parked across the street. Sarah had left the keys for me in a manila envelope under the porch mat. Inside, everything was still. Margaret's rose bushes, the ones she'd insisted they keep, were budding despite the winter neglect. I walked through each room, flicking lights on and off. The place felt smaller without their noise. Their possessions. In the kitchen, I found a small note taped to the fridge. It wasn't addressed to me, but I knew Kyle had written it. Sorry we couldn't be the family you hoped for. That line hit harder than I expected. I folded it, placed it in my coat pocket, and walked upstairs. The plan was already in motion, a full renovation, followed by donation to a local nonprofit. The Ramirez family, I'm a single mother with 3 kids, would move in this summer. Margaret would have liked that. She always believed a home should be earned, not inherited. Back in my truck, I stared at the house one last time before driving off. It was over. Not the grief, not the loneliness, but the era of giving everything to someone who offered nothing in return. Kyle's story wasn't finished, but mine was finally turning a page. The last time I saw Kyle before everything changed again, it was unplanned. A Tuesday morning in May, unseasonably warm. I'd stopped at Morning Glory Diner for coffee, the one on 3rd near the train tracks. Margaret and I used to come here after church on Sundays back when Kyle still joined us. I took my usual booth by the window, opened the local paper, and didn't notice the server until I heard the voice. Dad! I looked up. It took me a second to recognize him. His uniform was wrinkled. A diner polo too tight across the shoulders. His hair unkempt, beard patchy. The confident gleam he wore like armor had dulled. Now he looked like a man slowly realizing he'd spent all his chips. I nodded once. Kyle? He shifted awkwardly, wiping his hands on a towel. Didn't expect to see you here. Didn't expect to be served by you. He winced. Yeah, not exactly the career I imagined either. I closed the paper. He glanced around to see if anyone was watching, then slid into the booth across from me. I know you're not here to catch up, he said, but I need to say something. I waited. He didn't launch into excuses this time. No rehearsed speeches. Just looked down at his hands, fingers stained from dishwater and old syrup. I messed up, he said finally. Not just the money, all of it. Mom's funeral, everything after. I said nothing. I kept thinking you'd change your mind, that you'd miss me enough to reach out. He looked up, eyes hollow. But now I think you were right to stop, to pull back. A pause. I lost Megan? I didn't flinch. That was always going to happen. She left the week after the house was gone, he said. Moved in with someone who owns a restaurant in Seattle. Said she never signed up for poverty. He tried to smile like it was a joke, but his voice cracked. I guess I didn't either, but here we are. I watched him. Still no apology for the funeral. Still no mention of Margaret by name. But something was shifting. Whether it was guilt or consequence or both, I couldn't tell. He stood up. I'm not asking for anything, I just wanted you to know. I get it now. As he turned to go, I said, When's your mother's birthday? He stopped mid-step, a long silence. June? 10th? I shook my head. 15th. Daisies were her favorite flower. He nodded slowly, then walked away. Didn't look back. I sat there another 10 minutes before sliding a 20 under my cup and walking out without waiting for change. That night, I stood in the garden trimming Margaret's rose bushes, the ones I'd replanted behind my house in the spring. The stars were out. The quiet was clean. And somewhere down the road, my son was learning what it meant to rebuild. Not with handouts, but with consequences. The kind that taught you how to become a man. Summer came heavy that year. Thick air, long sunsets. The kind of heat that settled in your bones and made everything feel slower, more deliberate. I spent most evenings at the community center downtown, the one we funded through the Margaret Foster Memorial Foundation. Brick building, fresh paint, a plaque by the door with her name in bronze. Inside, it didn't smell like grief or memory. It smelled like pencils and floor wax and possibility. We ran scholarship workshops, free tutoring, cancer survivor support groups. None of it flashy, but real, tangible. Sarah Patterson, our first scholarship recipient, volunteered every Saturday. Nursing student. Bright. Quiet. The kind of girl Margaret would have loved. All effort, no entitlement. One evening, she handed me a thank you letter. Printed on lined notebook paper, her handwriting big and careful. Dear Mr. Foster, because of your foundation, I can go to school full-time this fall. My mom doesn't have to work overtime to help. I'll be the first nurse in our family. I know Mrs. Foster didn't know me, but I think she would have been proud. I hope someday I can help people the way you helped me. With love, Sarah P. I read it 3 times at my desk, then pinned it to the wall above my calendar. It said more about Margaret's legacy than Kyle ever had. At home, things were quiet. Peaceful, even. My porch light worked now. I cooked small meals. I walked every morning. I kept the lawn tidy. The kind of tasks that fill a day when you're no longer stretching yourself thin for someone else's survival. I hadn't heard from Kyle in months. Not a text, not a voicemail. No news was good news, I figured. Until Rosa called one Thursday morning. Dennis, she said gently, I saw Kyle yesterday. He was at Sam's Gas on Route 6. Working? Behind the counter, didn't recognize me at first, looked tired. I pictured him in a red vest, ringing up gum and cigarettes. I didn't feel joy, just a quiet confirmation. Did he say anything? No, but he looked different. That weekend, I drove out that way. I told myself I needed gas. He was there. Didn't see me at first. He was stocking shelves near the cooler. I stood by the register until he turned, and his whole body tensed. Dad, it wasn't a plea, just recognition. I nodded. Afternoon. He stepped behind the counter slowly. Pump 3? Just a coffee. He poured it silently, slid it across. I paid in cash. He rang me up. No small talk, no excuses. Then, as I turned to go, he said, How are you doing? The question caught me off guard. I'm well, I said. He nodded. Good. I waited, just in case. But there was nothing more. Outside, the wind kicked up dust in the parking lot. A truck rumbled past. I sat in my cab, gripping the wheel, coffee untouched. Maybe that was it. Maybe a quiet moment at a gas station was all the reunion we'd ever get. I didn't drive past again. Didn't need to. Sometimes justice isn't fireworks. It's a shift in weight. And the man who used to float through life finally learning to carry it. The Davenport summer wore on, humid and restless. One Thursday in July, Grace called. We'd met at church. Widowed 5 years. Taught Sunday school. Soft voice, sharp wit. Margaret would have liked her, not because she was meek, but because she never wasted a single word. She invited me to dinner with her family. Just a few of us, she said. Low key. I said yes, then spent the next hour in front of the mirror, wondering if my tie looked desperate. The dinner was quiet. Laughter, potato salad. Her grandson showed me his science fair project, a homemade weather balloon. We launched it from the backyard, he said proudly, and it landed in a cornfield in Minnesota. Grace leaned in. He takes after his grandpa, tinkerer, always building something. I thought about Kyle at that age. How he used to take the wheels off his toy trucks just to see if he could put them back on. Margaret would sit on the floor beside him, holding tiny screws in her palm like treasure. After dinner, Grace walked me to my truck. I'm glad you came, she said. Me too. A long pause. You're not as closed off as you think, she added, smiling gently. Just a little rusted. I chuckled. Margaret used to say I had the emotional range of a fence post. She touched my hand. Then maybe it's time to sand it down. The following week, we had coffee again, then dinner, then church together. No declarations, no pressure. Just the slow unfolding of something I'd long assumed was behind me. Meanwhile, the foundation grew. We launched a second scholarship in August, this time for trade students. Margaret had always said not every dream came with a 4-year degree. Some people are meant to build, she'd tell Kyle, with their hands, their heart. We named it the Foster Builders Fund. I made sure Kyle's name wasn't mentioned in any of the literature. He hadn't earned that association, but Margaret's name, her face, her story, that was everywhere, at the library, at the cancer center. On the wall outside the women's shelter, engraved below a plaque that read, She gave until it hurt, then gave more. Every time I saw it, something in me healed. Not all at once, but enough to keep going. One Sunday afternoon, Rosa stopped by with a pie. Peach, she said. Your favorite. We sat on the porch, cicadas buzzing, distant lawnmowers humming down the block. She looked at me carefully. I saw Kyle again. My hand paused on the coffee cup. He was helping an older lady load groceries into her trunk. Didn't see me. Just smiled, said something kind, then pushed her cart back for her. I stayed silent. He's working a second job now, stocking shelves at night. Think he's trying to pay off some debts. Still, I said nothing. She studied me. You ever think about giving him another chance? I looked out at the road. Every day, I said. I just don't know if I should. Rosa nodded like she understood something deeper than words. Maybe the point isn't whether he deserves it, she said softly. Maybe the point is whether you're ready. That night, I left my porch light on, not as a signal, just as a possibility. August turned into September. I spent most of it in the garden. Margaret's roses had come back stronger than ever. Even the climbing one we thought had died off 2 winters ago. It curled up the trellis now. Soft pink blossoms blooming like it had never been broken. Funny how things surprise you when you give them time. The house felt not full, but no longer hollow. Grace came by on Wednesdays. We played cards, swapped old stories, argued about politics and the way people do when they know it's not a deal breaker. The radio played softly in the background most nights. Margaret's old gospel station. I let it run, even when I wasn't really listening. I wasn't expecting company the evening Kyle showed up again. No call, no warning. I saw his car pull up, a dusty Corolla I didn't recognize. He sat there for a good minute, engine idling, then shut it off and stepped out slowly. No wife, no performance, just Kyle. He looked thinner, not sick, just simplified, like a man who'd stopped trying to dress up a mess and started living in it. He didn't approach the door. He stood at the edge of the driveway, hands in his pockets, waiting. I met him halfway. Didn't expect to see you, I said. I know. What do you want? He cleared his throat, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. I wrote something. I didn't take it. Look, he said quickly. I don't expect anything from you. I didn't know how to say it out loud. He extended it again. I took it this time. Felt the weight of it. Just a single page inside. I'll go now, he said. I'm not asking to come in. He turned and walked back toward his car. No drama, no backward glance. I stood in the driveway a long time after he left. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the letter. His handwriting hadn't changed. Slanted, inconsistent, too big in some places, rushed in others. Dad, I spent a long time blaming you for things I didn't understand, for not being softer, for not giving me what I thought I was owed. Now I see you gave me everything, and I wasted most of it. I'm not writing to ask for more. I'm writing to say I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally started working for things and realized how much I took for granted. I understand if you can't forgive me. But I wanted you to know I'm trying, and I think Mom would want you to know that too. Kyle, I read it twice. Then again, didn't cry, didn't smile either. Just folded it up, put it in the drawer beside Margaret's note. The one about not letting Kyle forget us. Later that night, I sat on the back porch with a blanket over my knees. The stars were clear. The garden was quiet. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew I was no longer angry. And that felt like the start of something. The letter stayed in the drawer for a week. I didn't mention it to anyone, not Grace, not Rosa, not even Robert Chen when we met for our regular foundation update. It wasn't a secret, just something I needed to hold quietly before letting it turn into anything else. Every night I'd walk past the drawer and pause. Not to reread it, just to know it was still there. Some things need time to ferment. Letters, regret, maybe even forgiveness. On the 8th day, I wrote back. 4 lines, no envelope. Kyle, I read your letter. I'm glad you're working. I'm not ready to forget what happened, but I'm willing to see who you're becoming. Dad. I drove it down to the gas station after dark, left it under the counter with the night clerk. No face-to-face, no ceremony, just a small signal in the dark. The next morning, there was a text. Thank you, I won't waste the chance. Short, no emojis, no guilt trip. I didn't reply, but I read it more than once. That week, I saw him again, like just a glimpse. He was walking out of a job site on Mill Avenue, hard hat in one hand, lunch pail in the other. It wasn't Foster Construction, but I recognized the logo. One of our competitors, actually. The kind who didn't hand out favors, which meant Kyle was earning his keep. For the first time in a long while, I felt something that wasn't shame when I thought of him. Not quite pride, but a kind of stillness. That weekend, the Ramirez family officially moved into the Maple Avenue house. I walked through the place one last time before they arrived. The new floors gleamed, walls freshly painted, kitchen redone with donated labor and foundation funds. There was laughter outside, kids on scooters, a grill warming up on the patio. I left a vase of daisies on the kitchen island. No card, just the flower Margaret loved. Mrs. Ramirez met me at the door, eyes full. "This house is a miracle," she said. "You've given us more than shelter." I shook my head. "No, ma'am. You're giving the house something it never had. A future." As I walked away, I felt Margaret with me. Not like a ghost, more like wind behind your back on a long hill. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt right. September faded into gold. Cooler mornings, crisper light, the smell of wood smoke and change. I'd always loved fall, mine, not because of the leaves or the holidays, but because it felt honest. The showiness of summer stripped back, just the bones of things. One Sunday afternoon, Grace invited me to the Johnsons for dinner. Their daughter Ellie was one of our scholarship kids. Bright, stubborn, full of plans. She wanted to be a civil engineer. Said she was going to design bridges people actually liked looking at. She showed me her sketches over pot roast. "You built things, right?" she asked. "Real things?" I nodded. "Still do in a way." Grace smiled across the table. After dinner, I helped Ellie's younger brother fix a wobbly bike chain in the driveway. He watched every move like it was surgery. "Dad's not great with tools," he whispered, "but I like learning stuff." Later, when Grace and I walked home, she said, "You've still got something to give, you know." I didn't answer, but I knew what she meant. She wasn't just talking about money. Back at the house, I found an envelope on my front step. No postage, just my name in neat handwriting. Inside was a simple note. "Dad, I've paid off my car. Working overtime now. I brought flowers to Mom's grave last week. I remembered the daisies. I'm still trying. Kyle." That was it. No ask, no apology, just a breadcrumb. The next morning, I stopped by Margaret's grave myself. The cemetery was quiet. A few leaves skittered across the path. And there, beside her headstone, was a small bundle of daisies. A little wilted, but real. Hand-tied with a shoelace. I knelt beside them and touched the petals. "Maybe he's finally listening," I said softly, not to me, to her. Back home, I wrote a letter. "Kyle, I saw the flowers. If you're still trying by Thanksgiving, maybe we'll eat together." No promises. But the door's not locked. Keep working. "Dad, I didn't drop it off. This time I mailed it. Let it arrive the slow way, like change does." October brought early frost. I pulled Margaret's old quilt from the cedar chest and draped it over the sofa. She'd stitched it during her recovery years ago. Said busy hands kept her mind from running off cliffs. Mine had done the same lately. The foundation launched a community mentorship program that month. Retired tradespeople paired with scholarship students. I met every Wednesday with Sarah Patterson and a few others to go over applications and organize volunteer calendars. It gave my days shape. Evenings, Grace came by more often. We played gin rummy in the kitchen, a slow game between warm silences. Sometimes she'd ask about Margaret, not out of comparison, but care. That mattered. "I don't need a replacement," she said once. "Just someone who remembers how to sit still in a room with another person." That I could do. Meanwhile, Kyle kept quiet. I didn't hear from him for weeks after my letter, no reply. No knock at the door. Not even a text. Part of me wondered if I'd misread the moment. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe the silence meant retreat, not respect. Then, the week before Thanksgiving, I got a call from Robert Chen. "I just ran into your son," he said. "Where?" At the volunteer shelter downtown. He's helping with pre-holiday food prep. I said nothing. He didn't see me, Robert added, but I saw his name on the apron, and I watched him for a while. No showmanship. Just work. I hung up and sat for a long time in the kitchen. There was a half-chopped onion on the cutting board. Grace's potato casserole recipe open beside it. I'd been preparing for Sunday dinner. The knife lay still. My hands didn't move. Kyle, volunteering. Not for points, not for photos, just doing it. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I was setting the table when I heard a knock. Not loud, not nervous, just steady. When I opened the door, he stood there in a gray sweater, hair cut short, holding a store-bought pumpkin pie. He cleared his throat. I wasn't sure if you meant it, he said. About Thanksgiving. I stepped aside. Depends, I said. Can you make mashed potatoes without turning them to glue? A faint smile. I've learned a few things lately. He walked in, carefully, like a man entering a room he didn't think he'd see again. I didn't hug him, but I set a second place at the table. And for the first time in years, I didn't eat dinner alone. He stayed for 2 hours. Not the whole afternoon, just long enough to peel potatoes, help stir the gravy, and quietly set down his fork when the meal was done. Grace came by near the end, dropping off cranberry sauce in a mason jar. Kyle offered to carry it to the fridge without being asked. She nodded a polite hello, didn't overdo it. Later, after she left and the dishes were soaking, he stood in the doorway, drying his hands on a towel. His sleeves were damp. He'd offered to do the washing. I let him. He glanced around the kitchen like it was both familiar and foreign. I almost forgot how quiet it is here, he said. Megan always had music or TV running. Something to fill the silence. I shrugged. Some silences don't need filling. He leaned back against the counter. I've been going to a group, he said. Debt management, personal accountability, that kind of thing. The kind of thing people don't talk about until they've hit bottom. I listened. I thought the bottom was when we lost the house, he went on. But it wasn't. It was sitting on a twin mattress in a studio apartment, realizing I didn't know how to cook my own dinner. I didn't laugh. I could have, but I didn't. He looked at the floor. Sometimes I still expect a safety net to appear, like someone's going to swoop in and fix it all. That's how you were raised, I said. No, he corrected gently. That's what I chose to believe. You and Mom gave me a lot, but you never promised rescue. That part stopped me. Because it was true. I never told Kyle life would be soft, but somewhere along the way, I'd made it so. Margaret saw it first. I ignored it longer than I should have. He stepped closer. I know this doesn't fix anything. No, I said, but it's a good start. Outside, dusk was settling in. The porch light clicked on. Automatic. The same timer Margaret set years ago. Kyle glanced at the photo still sitting above the mantel. Our wedding day. Margaret in her heirloom dress. Me looking like a man who couldn't believe his luck. I miss her, he said. I didn't answer. Some things don't need words. Eventually, he picked up his coat. Same time next week? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Bring real whipped cream next time, I said. Not that aerosol nonsense. He smiled, then left without closing the door too hard. The house was quiet again, but different now. Not empty, just resting. December came slow, the kind of Iowa winter that starts as a whisper before it settles into your bones. Early sunsets, steam rising from storm grates, that stillness before snow. Kyle came every Sunday. No dramatic speeches, no gifts, just consistent effort. He brought real whipped cream the second time. Vanilla bean, homemade. Grace raised an eyebrow when he set it on the table. Well, she said, somebody learned a thing or two. I Googled, he admitted, and we all laughed. By the third visit, he brought flowers, daisies, wrapped in butcher paper. Quiet gesture, no explanation. He never once asked for money, never hinted. That, more than anything, told me the change was real. The foundation held its annual fundraiser that month, a modest dinner at the town library. Sarah Patterson gave a short speech. We honored two new scholarship recipients, both first-generation students. Grace helped with the seating chart. And Kyle? He stood in the back, pouring coffee. Didn't ask to be introduced. Didn't try to reclaim the name he'd once tarnished. Afterward, he helped load chairs into the rental van. On the ride home, Grace said, I didn't think he'd stick it out. Neither did I said. But he's showing up. Yeah, I nodded. That's the difference now. Margaret would have liked that. Effort over excuses. Progress over performance. The week before Christmas, Kyle came by with a bag of groceries. Real food, not prepackaged nonsense. Potatoes, chicken, fresh rosemary. He even tried his hand at gravy again. A little too salty, but edible. As we ate, he asked softly, "Have you been back to the old house?" "Once," I said. "I haven't," he admitted. "Can't. Not yet." I understood that. Some walls hold too many shadows. He looked down at his plate. "I keep thinking about Mom. How she always made Christmas feel like something warm even when we had nothing." I nodded. She used to wrap gifts in newspaper when we couldn't afford anything else. And still made it special. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wrapped box. "Don't get excited," he said. "It's not expensive." I opened it after he left. Inside, a photo. Margaret holding baby Kyle in the hospital room. Both of them asleep. A moment I hadn't seen in decades. On the back, he'd written, "She gave me everything. I'm sorry I forgot." The next morning, I placed it on the mantel beside our wedding photo. Then, quietly, I made a phone call to the church. "Put us down for 2 seats," I said. "Christmas Eve service?" "Yes." Me and my son. Side by side again. Not as it was, but as it could still be. The sanctuary smelled like pine and candle wax. It was Christmas Eve, and the same worn hymns floated through the air, familiar as breath. Grace sat on my right, gloved hands folded in her lap. Kyle sat on my left, shoulders square, tie slightly crooked. Margaret would have fixed that gently, without a word. He didn't fidget, didn't check his phone. Just stood when others stood, sang when he remembered the words. When the choir reached Silent Night, the lights dimmed, and we each lit a small candle from the flame passed down the row. Kyle's hand shook just a little as he held his. Not from fear, I think. From weight? After the service, we stood outside in the cold with the other families. Laughter, hugs, the kind of warmth that comes not from weather, but presence. Kyle turned to me as we walked toward the truck. "Thanks for letting me come." I said, "You earned it." He nodded. "Feels strange. Standing here again?" I looked up at the stars. "Strange isn't bad." We drove in silence most of the way home. At a red light, he said, "I sold the last of the watches last week." I glanced over. "You kept those?" He nodded. "Pawned 2 already. Last one went to a guy downtown who actually fixes watches. Said it deserved better than storage." I didn't ask what he did with the money. Didn't need to. We pulled into my driveway, the porch light already on, snow beginning to fall. He got out, then paused. "I haven't said it enough," he said. "But I mean it." I didn't ask what it was. I just placed a hand on his shoulder and gave it a firm squeeze. Inside, I poured 2 mugs of coffee. He stayed for an hour, no presents exchanged. Just a quiet fire and a conversation about nothing. Weather, football, the noise the fridge had been making lately. As he left, I said, "See you next week?" He turned at the door. "If you'll have me." I nodded. "I will." And that was it. Not a reunion. A beginning. The next morning, I walked to Margaret's grave before sunrise. Just me, a bundle of daisies, and my hands tucked deep in my coat. The town was still asleep. I knelt beside the headstone, brushed away the snow, and placed the flowers at her name. "He's working on it," I whispered. "You were right to hope." The wind shifted through the trees behind me, quiet and steady, and for the first time in years, I felt her absence soften. Not gone, but settled. Like forgiveness. Like love still doing its work, even now. January settled in like dust on an old bookshelf. Quiet, unassuming, and heavier than it looked. Kyle showed up every Sunday like clockwork. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes nothing. Once he brought over a toolbox he'd picked up secondhand. "Figured we could fix the shed door," he said. "Hinges are loose." It wasn't the door that needed fixing, but I didn't say that. We worked in silence mostly, tools clinking in the cold, breath fogging the air. He asked questions now, not out of laziness, but curiosity. "Why use a square bit here? Should I sand this edge?" He was learning, with his hands, with his ears. Afterward, we sat in the kitchen. Coffee, ham sandwiches, nothing fancy. "You ever think about retiring?" he asked one evening. "Sometimes." "What would you do?" I shrugged. "This. Probably more of it." He nodded, then looked out the window for a long time. Later, Grace called. "You sound lighter these days." "Maybe I am." We met for dinner that Friday, not at a fancy place, just Macmillan's on Main, where the bread's always warm and the waitress knows your name. Grace reached across the table halfway through the meal. "You know," she said, "Margaret must be proud. Not because you forgave him, but because you finally forgave yourself." I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. I'd carried the guilt like a second coat, heavy, soaked through with years of thinking I'd failed as a father. The giving Kyle money meant giving him love, that saying no was cruel. Turns out, saying yes for too long had done the real damage. And now, slowly, we were building something different. Not perfect, but real. Kyle called one morning in late January, said he'd been offered a supervisor role at the lumberyard. Less physical work, more responsibility. "You take it?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted to know if you think I'm ready." I paused. "You're the one who has to believe it." "I know," he said, "but it helps to hear you say it." So I did. "You're ready, son." He didn't speak for a few seconds, then quiet. "Thanks, Dad." Just that. Later that night, I pulled out Margaret's Bible. Not to read, just to hold it. Her bookmark was still in Psalms. I kept it there. Some anchors don't need moving. On the back page, I'd written a date. Feb 12, 2023. Kyle stood on his own. Not a ceremony. Not a ribbon cutting. Just a quiet turning point in the kitchen where I'd once taught him to hold a hammer. And where now he was learning how to carry something heavier. In March, Kyle invited me to dinner. His apartment was above a laundromat, one of those long, narrow units with windows that rattled when a semi rolled by. It smelled faintly of detergent and burnt coffee, but it was clean, modest, real. He'd pushed the small table toward the window and set two places. Roast chicken, overcooked, mashed potatoes, undersalted. But he'd made it all himself. No takeout containers, no catered shortcuts. "Hope you're hungry," he said, nervous grin on his face. I could eat. We sat and passed the food like we used to. Nothing fancy, just hands and eye contact and grace before meals. Halfway through, he cleared his throat. "I spoke to a lawyer." I looked up. "About what?" "About dissolving what's left of the joint accounts. Megan and I, it's officially over. Divorce finalized last month." I didn't ask why he hadn't told me sooner. He added, "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure I wasn't looking for sympathy." "I'm not, just, it's part of the cleanup, I guess." I nodded once. "You filing bankruptcy?" Thought about it, but no, I owe people. I'll pay it. That'll take time. I've got time, he said. We sat quietly after that. The city buzzed through the open window. Sirens, laughter, brakes squealing somewhere far off. Kyle stood to refill the water glasses, then paused near the bookshelf. I kept some of the old photos. He handed me a small frame. Margaret holding Kyle on his first day of school, both of them beaming. I found it in the bottom of a box I'd left in storage. Almost tossed it. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. Your mother loved that day, I said. You refused to wear the backpack unless she wore one too. He laughed, almost sheepish. She did. Remember the old yellow Jansport? She still had it when she died, in the closet. Kyle sat back down. I've been thinking a lot about what she saw in me, what she believed I'd become. Not what I did become, but what she hoped for. I looked at him, tired but trying. Calloused hands, eyes steadier now, shoulders no longer hunched with resentment. She never stopped believing, I said. Even when you gave her reasons to. He nodded. I think that's what kept me going after everything fell apart. I couldn't undo the damage, but I could stop digging. He stood again and brought over a manila envelope. I didn't want to do this earlier, I wasn't ready. But I need to return these. Inside, checks he never cashed. Old ones, emergency funds. One from the week Margaret passed, still sealed. Another labeled Europe trip, repayment optional, all untouched. I know it doesn't change what happened, he said, but I'm not holding on to them anymore. It doesn't feel right. I looked up. Why now? He exhaled. Because I finally believe I can build something without your money. That line sat heavy in the air. The kind of honesty I'd begged for years ago. And now here it was, no longer demanded, but offered. After dinner, we walked down to the corner. The laundromat buzzed under our feet. A few machines still running. Fluorescent light flickering above the street. He put his hands in his pockets. I'm not expecting anything more, he said. I know we can't go back. We're not supposed to, I said. That's not how real change works. He nodded slowly. Still, I'm glad you came. So am I. I looked up at the sky. A soft haze covered the stars, but they were there, just dimmed. Before I left, he said, Can I ask something? Go ahead. If Mom could see me now, do you think she'd forgive me? I took my time before answering. She already did. That's who she was. And you? I met his eyes. I'm still learning how. He nodded like he understood. Like that was enough. And somehow it was. May brought a slow bloom, the kind of spring Margaret loved. Soft mornings, birdsong early, and that brief window when the roses hadn't yet demanded pruning. I stopped by the cemetery on a Sunday after church, daisies in hand, as always. Kyle was already there. He didn't see me at first, just knelt by the stone, head bowed, lips moving silently. I waited by the tree until he stood, brushed the dirt off his jeans, and turned. He smiled. Not wide. Just enough. You came early, I said. He nodded. Felt right. We stood in the quiet for a minute, side by side. I got promoted last week, he said. Same company. Full benefits. Training the new guys now. That so? Yeah, I like it. Being useful. I looked down at Margaret's name, sunlight dancing across the letters. She'd be proud. I hope so, he said. He turned to go but paused. Listen, I don't expect things to ever be perfect between us, but I want you to know I don't take this second chance lightly. I know. He looked at me, really looked. Thanks for giving it. I gave a small nod. You earned it. He walked off slow, steady. No performance. Just a man making peace with who he used to be. Back home, I sat on the porch in the afternoon sun, Margaret's quilt over my knees, a glass of iced tea sweating beside me. Grace would arrive soon with a pie. Kyle was coming for dinner. The porch light was already set to click on at dusk, though I doubted we'd need it. Inside, the house wasn't loud, but it wasn't quiet anymore either. It was something better. Alive. Forgiveness hadn't come all at once. It came in slices, small, deliberate acts, a folded towel, a meal shared, a Sunday with no anger. Margaret once said love wasn't just what you gave, it was what you stayed for. And in the end, she was right. Thank you for listening to the story. If it spoke to something in you, I hope you'll take a moment to share it or leave a comment for someone else who might need to hear it. Take care of yourself and of each other.